This is the finale. I've been doing this for a while now. Doesn't really matter because my shifting stopped working about 3.5 miles to go. Whew.
Hey y'all, it's Dylan with the Seasoned Bikepacker, where I share unbiased reviews, tips, tricks, and general information about bikepacking gear, routes, and strategies. I recently completed the Stagecoach 400 Ultra Endurance Bikepacking event and had the honor of going out with some amazing people. This year's Grand Depart included an incredible, diverse mix of Type 2 and Type 3 fun seekers. Sarah Didier came all the way from Switzerland to crush and get 4th place. I witnessed the largest age spread this year with the youngest and oldest competitors during a Grand Depart. Eden Teague at 13 years old and Mike Ingram at 73 years old. That's a 60-year age difference. 60 years. 3rd place, Adam Hawley from Durango, Colorado, absolutely smashed at 57 years old. This is why I love endurance sports. The longer the course, the less age, gender, and natural-born physical ability are factors. This sport is the great equalizer. Oh, and I forgot to mention the ITT nutcase who went out a couple days after the Grand Depart, Tom Schwimberger, and finished the course in around 38 hours. Holy shit. I was only 247 miles in, hadn't slept, and was cracked at 38 hours. What an amazing ride, Tom. Anyway, as I was riding along and occasionally checking track leaders, I noticed what seemed to be an epic back and forth battle for the 1st place spot between Dana Ernst and Jesse Reeves. Shortly after the event, I had the opportunity to sit down at a local Flagstaff coffee shop, Kickstand Cafe, with Dana Ernst and chat about his experience during this Grand Depart and bikepacking in general. Links for everything I mentioned are always in the description below. I really enjoyed this interview and would love to continue providing content like this where I sit down with event participants who have interesting stories to tell or are willing to share tips, tricks, and strategies with the bikepacking community. I can't do it without your support, and you can support me for free by simply subscribing to my channel and sharing this content with your family and friends. So please go hit that like and subscribe button to support me. All right, let's jump into Dana's experience on the Stagecoach 400.
Well, I've got McDonald's. Wow. I look a lot like my dad right now. I'm kind of shattered. No rest. I mean, no sleep, I guess that is. I made so many wrong turns. It probably wasted 45 minutes being a moron. Resupply at mile 120 was a tactical error. It took me a good half an hour to bushwhack up to the plaza. That was, I'm sure it'd be easy in the daylight, but I had no idea what the hell I was doing in the dark. I'm pretty wrecked. I'm cold, very cold. Spent a couple hours shivering. My feet are soaked. I'm really looking forward to some warmth. Right now I have some McDonald's, which is making me pretty psyched.
Yeah. My name's Dana Ernst. Live in Flagstaff, Arizona. I am a self-professed math professor. No, let's start that over. Self-professed. We're not going to do this too many more times. You gonna have bloopers? Yeah, I mean, there's some classic bikepacking races that sort of people know about, and Stagecoach 400 is one of those. I think what really put it on my radar is meeting Meg Noble, who's the race organizer for Stagecoach, last year at Pinions and Pines. And then Jeff Hemperly and Holly rode it as an ITT sometime last year, and they were talking about how great it was, and that sort of put it on my radar. I never really thought I'd be able to do it because it's at a time of year when I just can't get away from work. I happen to be on sabbatical this year. My original plan was to do the Arizona Trail 800, but my hip's not in great shape, and that all the walking and on and off the bike sort of made me reconsider doing something smaller. And so Stagecoach seemed perfect, and I just happened to see that registration was open, like within 10 minutes of it opening, and I got lucky and just signed up. So it wasn't like I had been set my alarm and had been planning on signing up for it. I think we finished in, it was just over 53 hours. I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. I think my moving time was 46 hours, and my finish time was a little over 53 hours. I was on a binary titanium hardtail with front suspension and pretty wide, high-rise handlebars. As I've done more and more of these, I've learned that I have to sort of really be on top of my nutrition, and that was the thing that sort of really kicked off me making spreadsheets for things, just to make sure I was keeping on top of my calories and sort of budgeting sort of how much tailwind or scratch or whatever I was going to need. And so that was what made me start making spreadsheets in the past. But it was really hard to estimate how long I was going to be out there because the course was a little bit different. The weather was not ideal, and I had no idea how I was perform. So I was really guessing and being pretty conservative in my estimates about how long I was going to be out there. So I ended up actually having way more food than I probably needed. And I wouldn't say I was motivated to do that because I wanted to do well. I just knew that I wanted to finish, and to be successful in doing that, I needed to sort of plan and be able to turn my mind off on those kinds of things mid-race, so that I could just look at what was already planned out and sort of like know how many calories I needed to get from point A to point B, what the rough timeline was, how many miles it was. So I didn't have to do like mental arithmetic while I was shattered. My time estimates were not at all accurate. Some things went way faster than I thought they were going to, and other things took way longer than they were supposed to. I'd say overall it actually worked out pretty well. I think the amount of powdered calories that I took in Tailwind, Scratch, and Carbo Rocket was probably pretty close to accurate. I had one baggie of caffeinated stuff that I never used. And actually, I'm pretty glad that I didn't dip into the caffeine really at all. I only had a little bit of caffeine when I was out there, just a couple cups of coffee and maybe a Coke or two. That's it. Prior to the race, I sort of thought, I think, if things go really well. So a few weeks before, I was pretty motivated to like go fast as I could. And I thought, I think I can finish in 48 hours. And then that was before I really looked at the weather forecast. I thought, I'm not bringing any sleep kit. I'm going super light. I'm just going to hammer. And then as I got closer, a couple things happened. One, the weather didn't look great. I actually felt pretty fatigued, and so I was really starting to doubt how well my body was really feeling. I backed off of my training. I didn't feel fantastic, and so I started to play a little bit more conservative. And I thought, wow, if I'm going to be out there for more than 48 hours, there's no way I can go without sleep. And so I decided to bring a sleep kit, which consisted of a pillow, a bivy, a sole bivy, and a down quilt. I ended up laying in the quilt for about an hour and 15 minutes across the whole course of the race. And during that hour and 15 minutes I was laying on the ground, I probably slept about 10 minutes, and that was on the second night. I would have liked to have gotten more sleep while I was laying on the ground, but I just sat there staring at the sky. The wind was really bad, and there was a lot of traffic where we were, and so that kind of kept me awake. But 10 minutes was better than nothing. But I certainly thought, especially being out there for 53 hours, I would get more than 10 minutes of sleep. I'm pretty amazed that actually I did as well as I did, given that, and never really had to fight the sleep demons. I never hallucinated. It actually was pretty easy, relatively speaking, this time around to go with that little sleep. That's surprising to me because in the past I've never been able to do that. So that wasn't a plan. It just worked out that way. Yeah, so when you and I left the hotel, there was ice across the entire road, and I was way too scared to ride my bike to the start, which was maybe about a half a mile away from where we stayed. And we walked the whole thing, and I just kept seeing people bombing down the hill on the way to the start, thinking, man, they're just going to wipe out. And I think someone did. I didn't see anyone crash. But it was a slow walk, and I thought, wow, this is going to be really interesting at the start. So I walked to the start because the roads were icy. We got to the start maybe 45 minutes early and just started, milling around, grabbed some coffee, met a lot of really cool people that I sort of knew about or knew from Instagram but never met in person. That 45 minutes went like that. It was really quick, and then we were off and running. Well, maybe not running, but walking. So we started by pedaling up some pavement, and it was icy, but rideable. And it was maybe 10, 15 minutes into the race is when we hit the snow, and then it was walking for, I don't really know. My sense of time right there is pretty bad, but I think it was probably about an hour and a half of walking through the snow. And everyone was, it was funny to sort of witness how everybody was behaving. I was trying not to amp too much, but I did notice that people were sort of like getting out in front, and so I tried to sort of keep them in sight, but tried to not go too fast. Certainly some people were overdoing it at the beginning, but I felt always in control and wasn't amping too much, and always was able to sort of back off a little bit when I thought I was amping too much, and kept track of my heart rate. So as soon as we left the snow, I was surprised at how quickly people rode away from me in the mud. because I thought, oh, I'm pretty good at riding in the mud. But I just wasn't willing to ride that hard. I probably could have kept up with him, but I was like, oh, it's a long race. We're only a couple hours in. I'm just not going to ride that hard. So for what seemed like quite a while, when we were in that single track section in the mud, I didn't see anyone front or behind me. There were a couple times I was looking really closely at my GPS to just make sure I was even going the right way. And then after that single track section, we hit some dirt roads that paralleled the highway. And at that point, I sort of grouped up with a few people that included 13-year-old Eden, who was just absolutely dropping the hammer every chance he got. Anytime someone got in front of him, he was right back at the front. And so then when we hit the pavement section, I think there were 4 or 5 of us sort of together. And by Sunshine Market, mile 22, maybe, I was alone at that point, because a few people I'd been riding with decided to stop. And then I didn't see anybody again until mile 52 when I resupplied, which is the first time I met Jesse. He showed up when I was sort of in the middle of my resupply, and then Mateo and a couple other people who I'm not actually sure who he was with showed up just as I was leaving at mile 52. Cruising down the highway, up with the front group, I guess. Lots of walking. So far, so good. So if you think I was meticulous in my planning, Jesse put me to shame. Like, every single detail on Jesse's bike and his kit was the most dialed I've ever seen anyone's setup ever in my entire life. And it was clear from the moment we started riding together that his system was completely dialed. Like, everything had been carefully planned, every little detail. So he was on a completely different setup than me. He was on a gravel bike, fully rigid drop bar bike. When I left the resupply at mile 52, he just looked so fresh. And actually, I had a couple instances of a little bit of a adductor and hamstring cramp around that time. So I'd already felt like I was backing off. But as soon as I was on that headwind road section, I really backed off. I expected Jesse to just come flying by me. But it wasn't until, I don't even know, mile 70 or something, that Jesse actually caught me on a long descent, on a dirt road descent, which kind of caught me by surprise, because I thought, oh, I've got the bike for this. I'm not going to see him on this descent, and he really caught up to me really quickly. So we rode together off and on for several hours, but we had completely different setups and completely different strengths. So it was like we'd keep sort of bouncing back and forth, and we were only ever together for a couple minutes at a time, and then I'd get in front of him, and then he'd get in front of me. Surprisingly, I think he was really, really strong on the really mellow single track sections, like faster than I was. And that was sort of unexpected. And then anytime it was flat or slightly downhill, especially on pavement, he'd get in his aero bars, and he was just gone, and I couldn't keep up. Every time there was a climb, especially a long climb, I'd usually catch up and then sometimes get ahead of him, especially if it was like a kind of a technical climb on the dirt, which there weren't that many of. I'd definitely get ahead of him. So I was a little bit stronger on the climbs, or he was backing off, I'm not sure which, but he was faster than me in spots I wouldn't have expected. We lost track of each other sometime around mile 110. I vaguely remember him saying he had to stop and change a jacket, and I just went ahead. And then I didn't see him again until the following morning after Alpine. And so I rode that whole night by myself through San Diego. No, we definitely didn't make a pact. We had been riding together, that second morning when we met up. Well, first of all, I thought I'd never see him again. When I got to Alpine, it was maybe an hour after sunrise, and I was pretty cooked from that night. And so I stopped at McDonald's, and I don't know how long I was there, maybe an hour and a half. And it was I think it was the second time I checked the tracker. Jesse looked like he was also in Alpine, but I knew he'd gotten there quite a bit of time before me, and I just assumed the tracker was not accurate, that he was certainly well ahead of me. But he actually was across the parking lot from me that whole time at Starbucks, and we didn't see each other. I literally thought he was gone, and I didn't think I would see him again, because he'd gotten quite a bit ahead of me late that night. And it was maybe half an hour after leaving Alpine, I caught up to him on a climb, and he was taking some clothes off. And I took an opportunity to take some clothes off at that point, and then we were riding together. That was the first time we were really riding together and chatting. We'd seen each other a lot the previous day, but we were actually sort of riding together for quite some time. And that section from Alpine to Cuyamaca Lake is amazing. That was by far my favorite section, which is not typically on Stagecoach. And so we were more or less together that whole time. But again, we had certain different strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes I was ahead and couldn't see him, and sometimes he was ahead and I couldn't see him.
Oriflamme Canyon. What the fuck? I had no idea that was coming. That was absolutely bonkers. I thought it was like, I don't know, from video I've seen, I thought it was like 20 feet long. It's like miles of insane descending. Oh, and I'm like kind of worked. And then the river at the bottom, that was kind of bonkers too. Yep, just ride it as much as I can.
When we descended, what's that crazy descent called? Oriflamme?
I remember it, but
Yeah.
it was called
Oriflamme? I don't know how to say it.
In the desert?
In the desert. I had no idea that was coming. I had heard people talk about the riding in the river at the bottom of Oriflamme, but and I knew there was a section that was kind of a rocky descent, but I had no idea that was coming. So Jesse's on a drop bar hardtail, fully rigid at that point, and I'm on, I got suspension. I think I was probably 25 minutes ahead of him at by the bottom of that. And so when I stopped at Agua Caliente, I had a moment where I thought, okay, if I'm going to get ahead of him and make him work, this is the time. I should just go. But actually, I was really worried that I wondered if he was okay. And I don't think we had cell service at that point, so I couldn't check the map. And so I resupplied, and I took my time, and I sat in the shade for a while, and I had some ice cream. And just as I was about to leave, he arrived. And he was definitely a little bit rattled after that descent on his bike. And as we were sitting there resupplying, I had said, it'd be really interesting to see if we make it together to the finish. That would be cool if we did, but you should always feel free to ride away from me. And he said the same thing, and we said that to each other repeatedly from that point on. So we never said, let's ride in together. In fact, it just seems completely unlikely that people would be able to kind of maintain roughly the same pace for that duration of time. At the very end, my derailleur just completely stopped working with about 3.5 miles to go as we were hiking up to the finish in the snow. That would have been a perfect opportunity for him to attack me. But at that point, we had certainly been together for so long and sort of were enjoying the shared experience. And certainly we were having a great time together. It wasn't an agreement we made, we just rode in together. I had one mechanical scare and one mechanical. Maybe at hour 6, my GPS told me that my derailleur battery was low. And so I had axis shifting. So I had one battery on my derailleur. I had a dropper post, which by the way, I was really happy that I had throughout the whole race, which had a battery in it that I knew that if I needed to, I could use that battery, and I had one spare. Based on the thousands of miles of riding around with axis, in my mind, that was plenty for 50 plus hours of riding. But to get a warning after having everything fully charged the night before, 6 hours in, that one of my batteries was critically low, that freaked me out. So I swapped the battery from the dropper post to the derailleur and vice versa. So I don't think actually the battery was that low because my dropper post worked the entire rest of the race with that battery that warned me it was critically low. And then I never put my spare one in, and with 3.5 miles to go, I got that, it just stopped working. I didn't have a battery low warning or anything, and so I thought, oh, no big deal, my battery's low. I'll just put the fresh battery in. Nothing. Then I tried waking up. I tried doing all kinds of things. I swapped the batteries around, and just it didn't work. Since I got home, I've since tried to get it to work, and it still won't work. I changed the battery in my shifter, so I'm pretty sure it's just completely brain dead. So I've never really had any problems with access, but I'm pretty sure it's toast. I'm not 100% certain. And then I had one sort of slow puncture not that long after leaving San Diego. I was riding on this dirt after being on this bike path for a while, and it was kind of dark, and every once in a while I noticed ptz, ptz, and I was like, oh, that's really weird. The dust is flying up in a really weird way. And I was like, oh, I think actually that sealant popped flying out. And so I immediately punctured it. I didn't even feel like I needed to pump it up, and I never did, and then that was it. So those are the only two vaguely mechanical things that I had to go wrong. There are two parts that really stand out. The canyon that I was descending, somewhere around mile 70-ish, when Jesse caught up to me, was absolutely gorgeous. We had just climbed up some pavement that was pretty steep, and then we hung a right onto some dirt road and then started bombing down some canyon. It was just absolutely gorgeous. I was all alone. I felt really good. There was waterfalls. It was just stunningly gorgeous. And then the second favorite part was that whole stretch from Alpine to Cuyamaca Lake. This climb is amazing, but it goes on forever and ever and ever. So long. So good. That just is so much climbing, really varied terrain, minimal traffic. Got to enjoy Jesse's company throughout that whole part. It was awesome. Really enjoyed that. My plan going into the race was to only grab water at the first resupply at mile 52, which is exactly what I did. I had all the calories I needed to make it to mile 120. And I carried all the scratch and tailwind and carbo rocket I would need for the entire race, which is many pounds of white sugar. So I topped off water at mile 52. I think that was Warner Valley, something like that. And then mile 120 was my second resupply. Was a massively tactical error. Prior to the race, a week before, the sideshow went in the reverse direction, and Greg Dunham had camped at that spot, which was mile 120 for me, and there was McDonald's there, and I messaged him and said, is it easy to get from the route to the McDonald's? And he said yes, and so I said, perfect, I love McDonald's, I love eating that mid-race, and so that was my planned stop. At that point I was alone and currently ahead of Jesse, and it's literally right there. You're riding on this like single track down on this greenway, and McDonald's is right there. And it took me a good half an hour of really stressful bushwhacking to get up to the parking lot. I'm sure it was easy for Greg in the daylight, or maybe I was being a total moron, but it was frustrating. I swore a lot. It took me a really long time to get up to the parking lot. And then when I got up there, I really didn't feel all that safe. It was kind of a weird area. And I took my bike inside until I got yelled at, and then it was the first time that something sort of didn't go according to plan, and I had to work on my mind game at that point. Thankfully, getting back down to the route mostly went smoothly. I had a few false turns, but I basically bushwhacked through a homeless encampment, which was really bizarre because there were people down there, and some of them didn't respond to me pushing through. Other people asked me questions. It was really unnerving. I felt like I was violating their space, and I didn't like it at all, and I didn't know what else to do. So that was horrible. And then my next resupply was mile 182, which also is your planned resupply off route. That was another tactical error. It wasn't that far off route, so it was no big deal, but just prior to that, I rode through a waist-deep pond, and it was cold and windy. And so when I got to the 24-hour Circle K, the guy that was working there was not very friendly, and he did not want me in there. And I was freezing and soaked, and I just kept telling him to chill out and let me finish my coffee. But I wasted a long time there just trying to vaguely get warm, but I kept going in and out to try and get stuff off my bike, and he wouldn't let me bring it inside, and so that was really frustrating. And I wasn't looking forward to the next little bit, but thankfully both of those times I sort of regained my composure and did some breathing exercises and just got over it really quickly and accepted where I was at. But those were two sort of frustrating experiences that first night that didn't go smoothly. I mean, now that I've ridden the route, I realize I could resupply in a whole bunch of other places that would have been a whole lot easier than my plan. I just didn't know any better. I have two least favorite parts. The first was the first sand section. Sand. The sand's not so bad. The washboards suck. Jesse, what do you think?
Oh, I love it. Great all around. My butt,
How's your ass?
tight like a tiger.
Mine hurts. My hands hurt. This is crazy. Which apparently finishes with Fish Creek. I now know that, but I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea how long it was. Every time I approach these things, I think I don't need to know exactly the details. I need to know roughly where some challenging spots are. I need to know how much water to bring. But I don't need to know exactly how long something's going to take or how long I'm going to be riding in the sand. There was somebody that I bumped into at Agua Caliente who did drop a bunch of information on me, but it was so much to take on. It was basically meaningless to me. So as we were riding on that sand section, I was with Jesse at that point. I expected to walk because I remember hearing all these stories about people like taking air out of their tires and like it being really sandy. I never walked. I think I dabbed once and was able to ride the entire thing, but it was like 20 plus miles of pretty brutal washboard. And I was basically done with it about halfway through. And like I kept thinking it was going to be over. And Jesse was not enjoying it either on his fully rigid bike. So we were both pretty miserable at that point. I'm not sure it was advantageous or not to be together. In my mind, it was sort of nice to share that misery with somebody else because we both kind of were grumpy about it at the same time. But maybe we fed off each other's negativity at that point. I think probably it was a net win probably for us to be together at that point. I was really glad it wasn't dark because riding through there and just not being able to sort of see where maybe the like least deep sand would have been really frustrating. So I think we went relatively quickly through there, but I didn't enjoy it at all. I was looking forward to turning off that section onto the pavement. There was the worst headwind ever. That next section from the end of the sand where you pass through Ocotillo Wells and then get all the way to Borrego Springs I thought it was going to be relaxing. It was way harder than I expected. I didn't hate it. It was totally fine, but I was trying to make the burrito by 10 p.m. at Borrego Springs and missed it by 1 minute. And that headwind was absolutely brutal. I got blown off the road 3 or 4 times. So that was, and I just had no idea that half that was uphill. Like, it just took way longer than I expected. We stopped at the bar in Ocotillo Wells and actually didn't do anything. We just sat there sort of collecting our thoughts. And all these drunk people came out to talk to us. I probably had conversation with 10 drunk people. I didn't fill up with water. I didn't go to the bathroom. I didn't change my clothes. We just sat there trying to debate whether we should hammer to Borrego Springs or not. And I think if we hadn't dawdled there, we would easily made the burrito at Borrego Springs. But I got to enjoy the drunk people at the bar. It was a unique experience after sort of just like being out in the middle of nowhere for a while. And here's a good instance where having totally different bike setups made a big difference. Like Jesse was basically just gone on that pavement part on his aero bars and was definitely feeling better than me. I thought he was gone. I may not see him again because he just like hammered on that road section and like I couldn't even see him. It was dark and I'm like all by myself and I think, okay, I just got to settle in and do my own thing. And then I caught up to him as he was like putting his headphones in. Then I got ahead of him for the last few miles to Borrego Springs, and then we were together again maybe the last 2 or 3 miles coming into Borrego. My least favorite part of the entire thing was bushwhacking through the willows. I knew it was coming, I knew roughly where it was, I had no idea how long it was, I knew it was going to be hard to find my way in there, but it's the second night after getting 10 minutes of sleep. I'm feeling okay, but it's cold, it's windy. My Garmin says it was 29 degrees. Probably wasn't that cold, but it was really, really windy. And coming into the willows, like I saw the first couple pink ribbons and then I didn't see any more pink ribbons. Like we wandered around forever just looking for a pink ribbon. And in our mind, you get down in there in the wash and you just follow it along until you get into the willows. But really what you're supposed to do is cross over to the other side and then go down and in. And that took us 45 minutes to figure out. And then that whole stretch through there getting stabbed by branches. I ripped my new rain jacket, which was a bit of a bummer. That went on for a really long time, and getting wet when it was at least low 30s was really demoralizing. That for sure was nice to have some company on. I think I probably would have freaked out if I had been alone. Just because I just felt like I was going to get lost in there. I think it just kept going. And when we came out of there, I think maybe if I had been fresh and we didn't have a brutal headwind, I could have ridden uphill from there. But I walked and Jesse walked. And we weren't always together, but sort of within eyesight of each other the whole way up that stretch up to that Bailey's cabin. Walked that whole thing. And then the sun came up and I felt a lot better. I checked the tracker for maybe the third time in the whole race, thinking we were hours ahead, and there was someone within 3 miles of us. and I said to Jesse, dude, I'll see you later. I don't have it in me to worry about this right now. I'm pretty shattered. Just go, and I'll see you at the finish. Because I thought for sure at that point, I'm really dragging. If this dude just put 20 miles into us, there's no way I'm going to hold him off. And Jesse took off. And it was probably about 30 seconds later, I said, fuck that. I got to at least try. And so I got my act together, screwed my head on straight, and started hammering. It took me a long time to catch back up to Jesse. And then we basically drilled it the whole rest of the way, like at cross-country race pace for the last 25 miles. Like every time there was a hill, I just got on the front and just drilled it. So after missing the burrito by 1 minute in Borrego Springs, Jesse and I resupplied at a liquor store, which was pretty entertaining because there was like a little kid working. He must have been 10. No, maybe older than that. Maybe 14 or something like that. I don't know. But it was pretty entertaining watching this guy and his son at the liquor store. And they basically had everything you would need. So we resupplied there, but it was really entertaining. And we were faffing around for forever outside that liquor store trying to decide what to do. And it was really funny because Jesse was reapplying chamois cream outside the liquor store when this minivan pulled up. It was filled with some like middle-aged women that were on a bachelorette party. So that was a trip. They were just like, "What are you doing?" So that was entertaining. And then yeah. And then we weren't really sure what we were going to do. I think Jesse looked at the tracker and was like, "Oh, we could sleep for a little while," or maybe I said that. I don't even remember. But we decided to kind of hunker down and look for a spot to sleep. But before we did that, we went to the gas station in Borrego Springs to see if they had anything warm to eat. But they didn't. And then we kind of like circled around town looking for a spot to lay down, and it was super windy. And then we're like, oh, it looks like there's a shelter in the middle of that big giant traffic circle. So we just went over there and slept in the middle of the big giant traffic circle in Borrego Springs behind a wall. Tried to sleep. I think Jesse slept immediately, and I just laid there for a while and got about 10 minutes of sleep. But there were trucks driving by and all kinds of things. And then what was weird when we woke up and started packing our stuff up, there were like cyclists every once in a while. At this point, it's maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and every once in a while, like a cyclist would ride by, and I'm like, what are they doing? And it turns out there was like a brevet event, like people doing a really long road ride that were coming through there around the same time we were there. But they had bags on their bikes, and I was like, it was a little bit weird because we knew they weren't in the event, but I was like, why are there people out here in the middle of the night on bikes? Two tactical errors I made was deciding not to pack my chapstick, because I was like, oh, I'll just use my saddle butter. But my lips got pretty raw pretty quickly, and I just was not going to put the peppermint from the saddle butter on my lips. Like, I just wasn't going to do it. So that was an error. And then the other error I made was I put on pretty heavy-duty sunscreen the morning of and just decided not to bring it because I thought, oh, I'm just going to apply the sunscreen and mostly be covered up the whole time. I don't need sunscreen. But the one thing I didn't put sunscreen on was I decided not to bring my watch. And so I have a white spot here that hasn't been exposed to the sun in a year, and I didn't put sunscreen on that, and it's very sunburned underneath here now. That was dumb. The car drive home was a little weird. Jen drove, thank God. I don't think I could have driven, but that 6.5 hour drive felt like 2 hours. Like it was over with like that. I maybe slept for 20 minutes in the car. I don't even know what I was doing for that whole time. We didn't talk that much. It just was like that. Every time I looked up, I felt like we were going like light speed, like Millennium Falcon, like Mach speed. I'd like, are you like going 130 miles an hour? But she was not. And it was just like so fast. So weird. Yeah, I was like, slow down. I was pretty happy that I'd chosen to bring my wool tights by Ground Effect. Those were perfect. I wore the tights for 75% of the race, maybe more than that. They were basically on the whole time. I was glad that I brought extra socks. I had waterproof socks and a wool pair of socks and then a thin pair of socks. I never wore that third pair of socks. And basically my feet were wet from the beginning and stayed wet the whole time. They weren't that wet when I was laying down in Borrego Springs, but definitely my shoes were still damp at that point. I took my waterproof socks off maybe halfway through day 2. I just was too lazy to take them off. And then put the wool socks on and rode those into the finish. I wouldn't say there was any single item that I would have left behind, but there was probably lots of little things that I could have jettisoned. I mean, in retrospect, did I need my sleeping bag and pillow and bivvy? No. So I carried those around in my tail fin, which was, way heavier than a seat bag. I had an extra pair of socks. I only wore my puffy jacket for that hour and a half that I laid down. I don't think I would not take the puffy jacket. That would be foolish. But the sleep kit, probably in retrospect, I didn't need it, but I don't think I would consistently make that decision not to bring it. If I said, I'm going to be out for 53 hours, I'd probably still bring a sleep kit. That's definitely the longest I'd ever gone with 10 minutes of sleep for sure. Yeah. Previously, like Arizona Trail 300, I tried to go straight through and definitely didn't make it, definitely hallucinated quite a bit. This was much easier to manage the lack of sleep. I think I probably would have had a little bit of anxiety if I didn't have it. Yeah. I had an extra shirt I never wore. I probably could have not had as many layers. I used them all. But I probably didn't need as much clothes as I had. I probably, for all the people that were in the top 5, top 10, I probably had way more crap than most of them, which gave me a sense of comfort, but I definitely was hauling around more shit than most people. I think it depends on the event. This was the best I'd ever felt consistently through a long event like this. I didn't have that many highs and lows. I felt pretty good the whole time. I got frustrated at my second resupply. I got frustrated at that third resupply. I got frustrated riding through San Diego, but these were like really minor blips. Other than those 3 instances, I felt pretty good in my mind game. So in prior events, I would probably say it's like mostly mental, but I felt like I had my mental game so dialed the last few months about everything that I've been going through and wrestling with, and I started seeing a therapist, and I started to feel like just working on my mind game really elevated my ability to sort of cope with things and just accept the current situation and then just let it go. In the past, I thought I was doing a great job, but I think it was really dialed here, or maybe it just went smoothly and I just wasn't really tested. My body also felt pretty darn good throughout the whole thing. I had cramps a few times in my adductor and hamstring. My hands and my ass were absolutely destroyed going through that sandy washboard section, and that made the whole rest of the thing, probably that was the hardest thing to deal with, was like how bad my hands and ass hurt. Given how I felt during the event, I sort of expected a pretty quick turnaround after finishing, but I'm way more wrecked than I would have expected, given how I felt during the ride. Like, my feet are killing me, they're swollen, my hands are the most numb they've ever been, the sit bones on my ass hurt. I have no saddle sores, which is great, but my ass hurts. So my contact points really suffered. I didn't see that coming. Oftentimes after events like this, there's sort of like the emotional hormone roller coaster, and it's been pretty good with respect to that. So none of that this time. There were times when Jesse was up ahead of me, and it was totally fine with me. I'm just gonna let him go. I'm gonna ride my own race. If I never see him again, that's okay. So there was those moments where I was just fully accepting of the situation, but there were other times where I thought, I think I can catch up, and I just got to dig deep and go, and there's hope that I don't crack myself. And so there were times when I felt like I really had to sort of dig deep a little bit, and I would think about my dad who recently passed away. I would think about my brother who died when I was younger. My mom's currently battling with some health issues, and I sort of thought about what she's going through right now. My son has had some issues recently, and that in particular was sort of a motivating feature for me to sort of feel like, not that he was out there with me watching what I was doing, but I felt obligated to set a good example. First, for dealing with trauma and conflict, even though it was self-inflicted. And so those are sort of the things that I would draw on, was sort of like just family, that sort of thing. Oh, and of course, at the end, when Adam, who finished third, was just a few miles away, I had to dig deep and be like, well, fuck it, I got to try and see what happens. Make him work for it. No, I would take the same bike. I was super happy to have front suspension. I think my fit was good, even though my hands and feet are killing me. I can't imagine doing anything different to improve that. I liked having suspension, liked having the dropper posts, so I think I would take exactly the same tires and everything else like that. I would definitely probably trim my kit down just a little bit and maybe find items that were a little bit more compressible. I'm not so worried about the weight, but I just felt like I just didn't have a lot of swap space to move stuff around.
Darkest moment was the Willows.
It definitely would have been the darkest moment if I had been alone. It was dark anyway, but having Jesse there was advantageous. So for sure, I can't imagine being there alone in the dark and not having had a little bit of a pity party for myself. For whatever reason, the wind really gets in my head, just the constant battering. And that stretch from Ocotillo Wells to Borrego had really kind of like, and there was times when I was on that stretch where I was like breathing out of the side of my mouth because it was so windy, trying not to get blown off the road. And then it was windy and cold in the Willows, and I was just so over it. Probably the darkest time was really the headwind before the Willows, coming into Borrego. That was the hardest part of the ride, for sure. Being alone through there, just in the dark, pedaling uphill, in the headwind, on pavement when I thought it would be easy. So expectations really played a role there. Like, I thought it would be easy. I'm on pavement. I'm in the desert. I'm just going to cruise to Borrego and get my burrito. But no, I'm going to work like hell to get to Borrego and then miss my burrito. I am a competitive person. I know that I am, and that comes from my upbringing. You know, my dad was my wrestling coach growing up. He's in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So to me, a bikepacking race is like a multi-day wrestling match. Like, I don't feel like I'm not a very good bike rider, actually. I'm just really tenacious. I'm horrible at going downhill. I'm okay at climbing, especially given my size. And I'm just good at grinding away and mostly maintaining a positive mindset. The one massive revelation I had out there, the one big thing I learned about myself, is that my eye of the tiger is restricted to chasing people. Like, if someone's in front of me, I want to catch up. I don't want to be left behind. But I almost never am in the mood to drop anybody. Like, when I get in front, I'm always like, oh, maybe I should slow down a little bit, or I feel bad for the person behind me. So my eye of the tiger is very different about racing to get to the front versus staying in front. I think some people, they get in front and they're just like, they're killers. They just want to keep crushing people. And I just don't feel like that. Like, when I was with Jesse or anybody else that I've ridden with in the past, like, you develop this relationship, and to me, that's way more meaningful and impactful than beating them. Like, I had no desire to beat Jesse, but if Jesse had been in front of me, I would have worked really hard to catch up. I was in front from like mile 20, more or less to the end, off and on with Jesse. And I didn't like it at the beginning because that wasn't the plan. I was like, I don't really want to be up here. Like, where is everybody? I was not hammering. I was really trying to back off and not let it go to my head that I was in front in that period of time, because I literally thought, oh man, this could change in 10 minutes. I could finish in 50th place. So I can't get wrapped up in being in front right now and who's chasing me. I literally didn't look behind me. I just did my own thing. I kept expecting people to pass me and get up to me, and that was totally fine with me. Like, it didn't impact me, and it has in the past. Like, oh, I'm in front, I got to stay in front. I wasn't thinking that this time, and probably worked out for the best, not worrying about it. Let me first say that no matter what, that dude Tom, if he had lined up at the start with us, he would have destroyed us, period. I have no doubt in my mind he was way faster than me and Jesse and everybody else that would have started the Grand Depart. However, it is different. He knew exactly what the record time was that Javier had done last year. He knew what our times were. And he was out there alone. His pace wasn't dictated by who was behind him. He was just chasing the clock. And I think he probably also had better conditions at the beginning and the end. But what did that save him? An hour, 2 tops? I mean, he went 15 hours faster than us. I made some tactical errors. I could easily see myself going 4 to 5 hours faster. And if the conditions were even better, maybe 5 to 6 hours faster, I could see that actually happening. That seems reasonable. But more than that, no way. No way. Not going to happen. And that would be like after having done the race. And I think this was Tom's first time, so probably he would go faster if he did it a second time. I'm not sure. But yeah, he crushed us, and props to him. Riding through San Diego, I got turned around so many times, made wrong turns or almost made wrong turns. And there was one spot near like the shipping area where I totally made a wrong turn, and then I couldn't figure out what to do. It was like 5 minutes of like literally like going around in a circle. And then once I got back on route, like 30 seconds later, I see a guy walk out of the shipping area and drop a flare in front of the railroad tracks and like block the whole thing off. And I'm like rolling in, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to go bombing by him. And then suddenly the train starts coming out and blocks the road. And I'm like, oh my God, I am going to be here forever. And it was moving so slowly. I didn't time it. It was maybe 20 minutes of just sitting there waiting on the train. And I didn't know if it was going to be an hour or 2. Like, I had no idea. And I had a moment where I had to like just be like, okay, it's just an opportunity to rest. And I probably should have just laid down. But I was like, am I going to go in 30 seconds? Am I going to go in an hour? And I just sat there. I ate a bit of food, but it was frustrating. And that was, again, a moment where I just had to like let it go. Nothing I could do about it. That was actually an aspect of the race that I didn't expect. It really actually bothered me. Riding. How many homeless people did we counter? 100? I saw homeless people that were probably teenagers, and it was really disturbing. I'm embarrassed to say there were a few times I felt unsafe. I probably didn't need to, but I felt like I'm in their territory, I'm infringing, and I felt like such an idiot, like riding around on my multi-$1,000 bike, and, by choice, and here are these people sleeping under the bridge. And then to make it even worse, you pass 100 homeless people, and then just a little while later, there are these giant, mega Tony Stark mansions. And I did spend a little bit of time thinking about, like, I wonder which person I relate more to. The person sleeping under the bridge or the person who owns the giant mega mansion. And I'm not sure. It bothered me. I mean, I'm really grateful that I'm able to do these silly things. I feel like it makes me a better person. Like every time I do something like this, I have a enhanced view of the world. I learn a little bit about myself. And so, yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to just go do things that they're not really sure what the outcome is going to be or how hard it's going to be, because you'll learn something in the process. And, one thing that's now really starting to stick is that, you say like, oh, during these events and things like this, like bad things are going to happen and it'll pass. But now I felt like I was like really living that pretty quickly. And so I don't know if that'll happen next time. Like, did I really level up and get to that point? I don't know. Maybe next time I go out and do an event, I'll get my ass handed to me and I won't have such a positive mindset. But actually, I look forward to that. It'd be nice to sort of like get my ass kicked and have another opportunity to grow. But I'm just so grateful to be able to go out there and do these things and have the means to be able to afford all the crap that you need. I'm grateful that my body made it. I just have had such doubts about my physical body the last few months after all my hip injury and stuff, and I just didn't know if I'd be able to do things like this again. And so I don't take it for granted, and I'm super happy to be able to have pulled off finishing feeling pretty good and having the experience with all the people I started with, and then so, you know, off and on with Jesse, and then, you know, getting to the finish and eating a burrito, finally. It was good. Jesse, my man,
Yo,
how you feeling?
we're working for it. Keeping us honest.
Car back. Jesse's my spirit animal. I'm going to be friends with him forever. I enjoyed being with him. We bonded as competitors, and then as sort of, you know, being in the foxhole together. And I'm totally okay with anybody thinking that's lame, that we should have like raced to the end. They can think that. That's totally fine. If somebody probably was going to have to win, I would put my money on Jesse. I mean, especially at the end. My derailleur stopped working. He could have attacked me. And then probably in general, he was probably a little bit faster than me overall anyway. And I'm totally okay with that.
A huge thanks to Dana Ernst for taking the time to do the interview, and a shout out to Kickstand Cafe for letting me take over a corner of their shop for a couple hours. If you're ever in Flagstaff, be sure to stop in and grab a coffee. During my ride, I shot tons of great video, and will be releasing my experience on the course as well. Well, thanks for watching, and remember to plan, pack, and pedal.